Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. Today we're into Daenerys VIII of A Game of Thrones, and in the Maester study we will be discussing Ahai by the Shadowlands.
Yes. Sir Ezra's been doing some research on that because here we are again, man. Another Daenerys chapter. At least this time we've had it's not. It's like, hey, we were just in a Daenerys chapter. Okay.
I mean, my thing is, I was wondering if Sir Matt was just going to call me out on the show for not playing. I was like, would anybody notice if we just skipped the Dany chapter? But this is a good one. I mean, of all the Dany chapters, it is decent. So yeah,
it is. Well, and that's what you and I said. It's not necessarily that Dany's chapters are bad. It's just that they're so spread out. I think in the first book, let me pull this up here on the wiki so I can just see. But I'm pretty sure in the first book, there's a period of time where you go through like 10 chapters without a Daenerys chapter. Yeah, it's so you have Chapter 36, Daenerys 4. Mm-hmm. Your next Daenerys chapter, Dany 5, is chapter 46.
Wow.
So it's like by the time you come back, it's like, whoa, man, what's going on? And so especially because she's just so far away, and everything else is happening so much in King's Landing and stuff like that, that it's hard because like Sansa doesn't have that many chapters in this book. She only has 6 chapters. Mm-hmm. Arya only has 5, but it's because characters appear. Arya and Sansa are in almost all of the Eddard chapters.
Sure.
So, or Sansa's in the Arya chapters, or vice versa. And so with Dany, especially in this first book, she just kind of gets lost, especially there in the middle of the book. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I actually like Dany's character. I just like her character when more of our other characters show up around her that we know. So. And I like Jorah, so that's great. But yeah, she's
a much easier read if you do a POV Dany read, because as we've just said, it's not even really until about A Storm of Swords when you find when some other characters start to show up into her kind of character arc. So
Yeah, actually, she's going to go through in the next book. I mean, good God, there's going to be a drag for a little while, which is going to be crazy. But yeah, it'll be fine.
Yeah, no, but her arc also speeds up quite a bit in Clash of Kings, which we're only 9 chapters away from. So it is getting ever closer, getting ever more excited. So all right, well, head on over to the little small council here. Sir Ezra, how are we doing today, man?
Doing good. I actually have a massive headache, though. I will say that. Okay. So if I sound a little like out there, it's just literally feels like somebody took an axe and just went right on the top of the head. I don't know, dude. It's crazy. I think it's probably because I'm trying to, yesterday I only drank water and I had 1 glass of milk. So, Sir Matt knows, I live off of coffee and, I go get my cold brew. I'm trying to cut that out, dude, because it almost killed me on Friday. Remember that? I think I called you.
Thursday? Whatever day we were recording.
Yeah.
And you were like, man, I think it was Thursday.
It was Thursday,
and you were talking about, man, I just don't feel good. And I'm like, well, what's going on? You're like, I don't know. I had 12 cups of coffee. It's like, well, okay, man.
Yeah, dude. So I think
I know Sir Ezra has he has kind of a caffeine addiction. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately, I tried to tell him to calm down on the Coke.
Right.
He drinks a lot of Coca-Cola, which in the first place is just entirely incorrect because everyone knows you should be drinking Pepsi because that is by far the superior cola.
I don't know, man.
I am a true House Pepsi supporter. Okay.
Yeah. I'm House Coke for sure because
let us know somebody make a poll. Are you House Coke or House Pepsi?
Yeah. Let me just tell folks real quick though. I am a pop connoisseur, in case people didn't know. And when I worked,
and we're from Ohio and we call it pop.
Yeah, it's pop. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So tell me if this isn't true. When I worked at the Olive Garden, people would ask for Pepsi, and I'd say, well, we serve Coke. They're like, wow, man, that sucks. I really wanted a Pepsi. I'm like, well, we do have a couple that have been sitting out for about 3 hours and have gone completely flat. If you would like one of those, I'm more than happy to bring that out. So, so yeah, you people just let me know. Let me know. If,
wow. No, man, I'm telling you, there's just that, you drink that ice cold, crisp Pepsi. It's the way to go.
Oh boy. Okay. All right.
So let us know. Make a poll. It's an argument that Sir Ezra and I go back and forth on all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
But nonetheless, yeah, cutting down on the caffeine it's always good.
It's necessary. So, how you doing out there on the West Coast?
Hey man, I am good. I have been I've just been working out a lot.
Let's go.
Lately.
Let's go.
Been really trying to cut down. I lost about 7 pounds last month, so I'm feeling pretty good, pretty confident about that. So that's kind of it. Getting my office put back together. Have one last thing. We have an electrician coming. He's going to do some work on some like the wiring and install a new outlet. So once that's done, then I can really start to piece the my office back together. I have cords everywhere. I mean, it looks like it looks like a web in here or something.
Jeez.
So
yeah. Well, that'll be nice to get that all
done. Let's see some other things we have going on. We finally got back some sticker ideas from our artists, so those will be coming. Those will be coming soon. I think we really kind of like what they did there, so we have those coming. Stay tuned. They are coming. We're just had to work with artists, and they need their creative space.
Yeah, their time.
I don't know
if you told folks we lost our artist. We don't know.
I know our other artist. Don't know what happened.
If he died, I mean, I honestly think he may have honestly passed away. I don't know. I feel like
I don't know, man. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah. So, anyways.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, any other kind of news, Sir Ezra, we need to share? Anything?
Nothing. Just don't forget to check out the Discord. We've got some cool stuff going on there. Lord Adam Parker and Maglum have been working on the doc for our patrons, just like house sigils, names and titles and walk-up, all sorts of cool stuff. So check that out. Reach out to those guys if you want to be a part of that. And I think we even talked about posting it or putting a link to it in the Discord underneath like house stories. So we have origin stories, like a channel in there where people are kind of sharing where they're from, and people are thinking about putting it on a map and mapping out where everybody in our little book club happens to live in Westeros and Essos. It's pretty cool. So
yeah. One thing I will say, we did release some more Patreon content. Actually, last week, man, we released a lot of stuff. We did the Q&A, which I think you and I had a ton of fun with. We hope you guys really enjoyed that. We did the Pose of the Raven's Nest that we did a couple weeks ago, and then we released on Patreon our next Show Watcher's Guide to the Books, where we started talking a little bit more about Harrenhal, The Night of the Laughing Tree, Howland Reed, and then we did part 2 of our huge 4-part Patreon Harrenhal series that we're working on. So, and this was a lot about why didn't Rhaegar call a council if the whole kind of purpose was to call this council? Why didn't he do it? So that's kind of what it was about, and I think you and I had a ton of fun doing that. So
absolutely. And actually I think we have a musing coming up probably early this next week for folks too, so stay tuned for that as well.
But I kind of want to have a little impromptu musing right now, if that's okay, Sir Ezra.
Yeah,
because I've been fired up about it, and it's just it's just kind of a teaser. Maybe we'll talk about it more in discussion. But okay, so one of the things I was reading A Dance with Dragons this week.
Yeah,
I've been diving back into like some deep reading of the books, and I was reading kind of the Jon Connington, one of the Griffin chapter where Jon Connington retakes Griffin's Roost.
Yes,
and I started thinking more about, we had this discussion. I can't remember if it was on Patreon or on the main show a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how if we look at what the show has told us, how do we get certain characters to certain arcs to make sure they fit that? And one of the characters we talked about was, Jon Connington. And we were talking about Okay, well, let's say that in the show it's Jorah Mormont who gets grayscale, and then we're saying, well, in the books it's John Connington. So is it going to be John Connington at the Citadel in the books? And maybe he's the one who kind of reveals to Sam all this stuff about Rhaegar, and then maybe that's how Sam tells John who his parents really are. And it's not, it has a lot less to do with. It just goes down differently. He doesn't find it in an old book or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And so one of the things I was thinking about, and another thing about, we've been talking about, well, you can't just move this piece here and have it all fit, right? Like if Bran is going to be king and Sansa's going to be Queen of the North, how do we get there? And so one of the characters I was thinking about is Harry Strickland.
Okay.
In the show, he kind of shows up and he's pretty much useless, right? I mean, he shows up, he doesn't even bring the elephants. And and I mean, then he gets wiped out in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I was thinking about, and something I've seen a lot of people talking about on Twitter, some other Game of Thrones like podcasts and YouTubers. One of the ones I kind of specifically remember was Gray Area was saying this. I haven't really watched a lot of her channel, but I do follow her on Twitter, and so I don't know if she did a video or not. I just remember seeing a tagline, and some people were talking about what if actually. Some of the things we saw in season 8 are flipped around, and it was kind of this idea that it makes Dany just kind of blowing up the city after hearing the bells, which we're going to talk about a little bit today.
Yep.
They were arguing that it doesn't necessarily make much sense, and it would make way more sense if it was Cersei blowing up the city after hearing the bells, because Cersei gets the walk of shame. And she's already in the show blown up the Sept of Baelor to totally try and kill off the Faith. And so they're saying, well, what if it's kind of flipped around? What if Cersei has to leave King's Landing and say comes back, and maybe she actually ends up doing some sort of marriage alliance? This is kind of my own thought introduced here too.
Yeah.
Maybe she has to marry, say, John Connington, because in his chapter he talks about maybe possibly marrying somebody to increase their power.
Yeah.
Or young Griff or something like that. And so that was just something I was like, oh, I could kind of see that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That was a couple weeks ago. We talked about how do we get people, how do we set up these events, and looking at Winds of Winter, really what do we think is going to happen? On that note with John Connington and him possibly being the guy who ends up at the Citadel and gets his grayscale like removed or whatever, how does he? So for him to go there, I almost feel like he does he just travel there because like he needs the assistance, or does he have to go there? Is he, he's not taken captive, or he's not a prisoner, is he? I mean, is it something that maybe young Griff would just say, I want you to go heal yourself so you can be of more service to me? Maybe
it's just like Dany.
Yeah.
Who will see, because that's what Dany tells Jorah Mormont in it's like season 6 season season 6 I think is when, or at the end of, maybe it's like the end of season 5 and then he gets healed in season 6. I'm not remembering it exactly, but it was just something I was kind of thinking about because I was listening to the Dany chapter this week to get ready for this, and then I was going back through Dance of Dragons and I was kind of making some connections because I was like, I just want to dive into some of these other characters, because a lot of the chapters I kind of skip over a lot of times are the ones that aren't our main characters, so stuff with like the grade, like Balon Grey, or not Balon, but Victorian Greyjoy, and like young John Connington. So I was just kind of listening to both of those in tandem and thinking about, as we've been doing the Show Watcher's Guide to the Book series on Patreon, it was all just kind of piecing together in my head, and I was like, how do we get there? How do we make this happen? What has the show shown us that we're gonna have to swap some characters around in the books to see?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, one more thing I'll mention too, just for folks to kind of track down, because I've often thought that there's a lot of there's so much like plotting that had taken place for years with the whole young Griff thing that we don't really know, like who's been behind all of it, or we kind of do, but we still don't know quite the extent of it. An example of that is, let's see, I think it's, let me make sure here. one of young Griff's like companions that he's with, is Raleigh Duckfield, who his name is Duck, and he's a knight serving with young Griff. Well, he happened to be the former squire to Harry Strickland, so of the Golden Company. So you got this connection already to the Golden Company through Duck, and it's kind of crazy. It's been there for a long time, and it's like they've been scheming and setting this up for who knows how long. So I just think it's really interesting. There's a lot there, and this is going to be a powerful force that shows up in Westeros, that has showed up in Westeros, and we know, major spoilers, well, I won't mention it exactly, but like in Winds of Winter, we do have a chapter that discusses really their success in this campaign. So they're a big deal. But yeah, I'm down to keep talking about that later and see how far we can tease that out.
Yeah. So, all right, it was just kind of an impromptu thing I was thinking about, and I was like, hey, I gotta ask. I asked Sir Ezra on air about this.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do we want to head over a little bit to the Maester's study?
Yeah. So, we're in the Maester study now, and as I was reading this chapter, I was thinking about Ahai and just how it keeps kind of popping up. And, at one point, Jorah even suggested that they go there. It's a port that they believe they can get a ship and sail back to Pentos, I think is what he says. And what's nuts about that, by the way, go look at a map. Let me pull one up here real quick. And, yeah, it's just I feel like there's so many other ports. I don't know how far over they are, like when you look at a map. I was trying to figure out where Dany is in this chapter, because to go to Ahai or whatever, to be recommended to go there, that's just a long ways, right, Sir Matt? I feel like that's just across.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a long ways.
Yeah, aren't there other ports along the way? Is what I was trying to figure out, and why wouldn't we go there? But if they're over in the Dothraki Sea, or they're even further maybe east than I realize, maybe it would make more sense, and then they could board a ship, and then they could sail back over to Pentos, which is what they want to do. But there's a bunch of southern ports that I feel like they could have gone to, so it makes me wonder a little bit about Jorah and why he would maybe want her to go to Ahai. Is there something else going on? But that's just a random thought. So now in just looking at Ahai, and what is it? It's this like mysterious port city. It's located in the far southeast of Essos, where the Ash River meets the Jade Sea. So, at its eastern exit. So, it's surrounded by all sorts of mystery. We've got characters like, Melisandre, we know, has traveled there. We've got rumors of Marwyn being there. We've got rumors that, Mira Mazdur says that she went there and learned some of their shadow binding techniques and some of their blood magic, I guess, right? So it's just a kind of a weird city. We don't know much about it. It's said that there are no children that lives there. So you think about blood sacrifices, and just maybe these people that live there might be sacrificing children to preserve their age or their wisdom or their knowledge, or, doing certain rituals and stuff. We just don't know. So now another thing that's interesting about this, I found a 5-part like Reddit, theory, I guess, if you will, post just about what is going on in Ahai, and how it ties back to this like the black stone structures, which I think there's a bunch of YouTubers who have done theories on this. The Sea Stone Chair, the foundation of the High Tower in Old Town.
We've talked about that as well. When we did I think they talk about it in like the Dawn Age in A World of Ice and Fire, and just this chair appeared to have been there for much, much longer.
Right. And the what's interesting about it is a lot of people believe it's the outskirts of this ancient empire, really, if you will. So the 5 forts and Ahai, if you will. So the 5 forts are these different, like Toad Road is another one. Let me find the other one here real quick. The 5 forts. So this is the eastern edge of the known world, between the plains of Yogasnai and the Grey Waste, just south of the Bleeding Sea. It's actually, if you look on the map, it's like It's just north of where Ahai is, and it's these fortresses. It looks like, and their structure is this fused stone. It's this oily black stone, and people have been theorizing or wondering how all of these are connected. Was it part of some ancient empire, if you will? So it was some civilization that built these great things, and so it's well before the Valyrian Empire, and people believe that whatever this civilization was, that they also could ride dragons, that they may have been the original dragon riders. And some people talked about dragon binder being, having some properties or having a strong relationship or ties back to Ahai, and it looking like that it may be tied to that culture, that civilization. So it's just kind of a big deal, and I don't ever really talk a whole lot about it because none of our characters really go there. We talk about going there, and we talk about Quaithe, who comes from there wearing this mask and stuff, and it's real mysterious. Some people believe there's a connection to the Deep Ones, right? So there's actually a funny theory I found, which is that Ahai is connected to the Deep Ones, and that Ahai is also the opposite of Harrenhal, and that there's some parallel between those two.
I could believe it.
Yeah, which is interesting, just that it may be, some type of, not that it's the same structure, but it may be something close. I don't know. So there are so many theories, though. I just didn't realize that people had done this much work on Reddit, with Ahai. So really interesting. But if you want to track down those structures and look at all that, I think that's great. I think that the important part for this chapter is just that there's a lot going on there in blood magic. Like, that's seemingly where people the spell work, and if magic has retreated from Westeros and it's not really there and it's sort of creeping back, it would go as far back as to like Ahai, and then from there it seems like it's now with the red comet coming and everything that's happening, it's like moving and spreading back out across the land. It's this resurgence of magic, and it seems to be coming from that area, and Dany's a part of that, getting caught up in that wave. So yeah, I won't go into any of the theories because we could do a whole. We've actually thought about maybe going on our Patreon and doing some theories there, because for example, one of them is that they are feeding the army of the undead, and that they are somehow connected to the others, and all this stuff. So
I've seen a theory that Ahai, because that's right where the map essentially kind of stops, is actually just like, maybe there's like a mountain region or something, but it actually loops around. So people have said like there isn't an unknown continent to the west of Westeros. It just loops back around, and so it's actually that is the whole planet. It's just Essos and Westeros.
Yeah. I mean, we had mentioned in Fire and Blood, Alyssa Farman had taken the Sun Chaser and supposedly makes it all the way, goes west of Westeros, and actually ends up landing on, air quote, Essos, so near Ahai, and lives there. So it may still be, if it is true that Melisandre and the folk who end up getting involved there find ways to preserve their life and extend it, that maybe she is still alive. So that's a theory that's out there as well. But anyways, it keeps cropping up. It's in all of our books, and actually there's major references to it in A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords, A Feast for Crows, and A Dance of Dragons. So I can only imagine that we're going to get more references or nods to it in Winds of Winter. So yeah, but yeah, I think that's it. I just wanted to kind of mention it, and we can talk more about it later. But yeah, it's an interesting spot. The people there are really interesting. The Dothraki believe that the Ahai are spawn of shadow, right? And they hold them in contempt and fear. So yeah, I'll go on and read a little bit more here. There are no children in Ahai. All who dwell there wear masks or veils, and often walk alone or ride in these ebony, what are they called? Palanquins, something like that. Whatever those things are. Big, yeah. And so they hide behind dark curtains. What else here? Only the shadow binders of Ahai dare to travel upriver, and even they fear to trade before the door of the corpse city. So it's like this closed off city where, so we've talked about the Shadowlands. It's near this this area where the Shadowbinders are the only ones who dare to approach the city. So we really don't even know much about what's inside the city, you know? But okay, I think that's it. We could go on and on, but I think we'll leave it there for now.
Yeah. It's something that you think we'll learn a little bit more about, because I hope we get some more backstory on Melisandre or, other Red Priestesses in Winds of Winter. Just because I think it would be cool to get some more of her backstory, because we don't really get that in the show. Her ending is she shows up and dies. So
yeah.
I mean, she's also like the MVP of the Battle of Winterfell, but
yeah, I was just thinking too, if this goes back as far as to like the Dawn Age and stuff, that we may actually in the prequel show, right, get references to this land.
Oh,
right?
I think there's going to be a ton of world building in the prequel show. A ton of world building.
Yeah. So, anyways, that would be kind of cool to see, maybe learn more about these people or learn about this ancient empire or civilization that and why it fell, what happened to it. Was there another long night before the long night that we talk about, So.
It's possible.
Yeah. Alrighty. Let's move on over here into the chapter. And anytime maybe that Ahai is brought up, we'll go back in and we'll learn some more. And actually, our characters tell us more and more. That's really what's key, is to listen how they characterize the city.
Yeah, I mean, there may be dragons there.
That's rumored. Yeah,
I mean, it's rumored. So, okay. Well, this week we are at Daenerys VIII. Last week we were covering Catelyn 10, where Robb Stark had managed to lead his host to River Run without detection. Now Catelyn waits with her guard as her son sends his host to ambush Sir Jaime Lannister. Ended up capturing him there. So the last time we were with Daenerys, Khal Drogo had defeated another Khalasar, capturing a town with many captives. Dany intervenes when she sees Dothraki warriors raping the women. When she finds Drogo, Daenerys is concerned about her husband's wounds and calls for the healers. Mary Mazder, one of the women she has rescued, speaks up that she is a healer, and Drogo agrees to let her tend his wounds in her temple. This week, Khal Drogo has fell off his horse. Dany orders the Khalasar to halt and calls for Miri Mazder. The God's Wife declares that only blood magic can save Drogo. As the rite is being performed, Drogo's blood riders attempt to intervene. A fight ensues in which Ser Jorah Mormont is injured, and all of Drogo's blood riders are killed. Daenerys starts to hemorrhage, and Ser Jorah carries her into Drogo's tent.
Dang.
Yeah, things are picking up for Daenerys here. Let me pull up her chapter here. The flies circled Khal Drogo slowly, their wings buzzing a low thrum at the edge of hearing that filled Dany with dread. The sun was high and pitless. Heat shimmered in waves off the stony outcrops of low hills. A thin finger of sweat trickled slowly between Dany's swollen breasts. The only sounds were the steady clop of their horses' hooves and the rhythmic tingle of the bells in Drogo's hair. Ding. Every time we say bells, I'm about to make a note. And the distant voices behind them. Dany watched the flies. They were as large as bees, gross, purplish, glistening. The Dothraki called them blood flies. They lived in marshes and stagnant pools, sucked blood from man and horse alike, and laid their eggs in the dead and dying. Drogo hated them. Whenever one would come near him, his hand would shoot out quick as a striking snake to close around it. She had never seen him miss until today. So,
jeez, he's not doing well.
He is not.
To state the obvious. And he's got to stay in his saddle, because if he, it's key that he keeps riding. That's his. That represents that he's still in command. He's still in charge. If he can't mount his horse, he's a dead man.
Yeah. There's a line later, and that's essentially what this chapter is about, is that he's weak and Dany is now put in this position where if he dies, everything is gonna fall apart. And Jorah Mormont has to explain this to Dany, that they won't follow you. They're not bound to follow you. They're bound to actually take you somewhere else, and they respect power. There's a line I'm gonna skip, just kind of not the middle of this chapter because it's a rather long chapter, but just a couple pages here. Princess, hear me. The Dothraki will not follow a suckling babe. Drogo's strength was what they bowed to, and only that. When he is gone, Jaco and Pono and the other Khas will fight for his place, and this Khalasar will, devour itself. The winner will want no more rivals.
Yeah. Well, which means that it's just crazy to think too that like, really, she needs for her son to live. Her husband has to live. He has to, for him to grow strong and things like that, and be raised in this Khalasar. Without his father, whatever. There's no. It's not like they're gonna send Dany back to the Sacred City and then let his son live and possibly challenge them later on as he grows older and stronger. They want fewer and fewer rivals. So
I wonder how many sons of Khals still exist.
Yeah,
I wonder because we never really hear about that kind of structure. It just seems like, well, there's always just there's tons of Dothraki, but that we never hear about ones and like some of the great Khals that ever existed and things like that.
Yeah, they seem to just gain power. I don't really know how they come to be. I'm guessing that there are some situations where maybe a father of his Khalasar would live really old, and then would raise his son to kind of take his place. But it's like, man, if they die in battle or something, then all right, see ya. You're done.
I would have to imagine that they can't be in power very long because it seems like they're always fighting each other.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's like an exact number on how many there are. I'll look that up and see if we have like a known number, maybe.
Yeah, because there's a handful of Dothraki tribes that are roaming around all at once, and they talk about how they run into each other. And you would think though that, I guess it's just their culture, that somebody would try to use Vaes Dothrak as a staging area and learn at some point, we need to kind of solidify power, but they just keep going on and on. And I wonder if it's just because of the nature of their tribes that they're always warring, so they never really solidify power at some point. Because the wildlings, who are in a similar situation, are able to do that under Mance Rayder. When you think about the hill tribes that Tyrion's with, they're so much smaller that it seems like they're never really going to kind of, let's all band together and try and establish some kind of army so we can kind of put ourselves in a better situation. But when you think about the Dothraki and the wildlings, I mean, you would imagine they would be kind of similar people, but that just doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. It seems certainly more that the wildlings are a little more, I guess I don't want to say sophisticated, but that's almost what it comes across as. Maybe it's just because of they have that leader of Mance Rayder, as opposed to there isn't really a one solidified leader of the Dothraki until Dany essentially becomes that.
And even before Mance, I mean, it's like they still seem a little bit more, I don't know, they kill each other too. There's certain tribes. I mean, you've got up there with the wildlings, and are super scary and kind of have we don't really know what governs them, what guides them, if you will, besides some of this talk of old gods and things. But yeah, it's different. They're different, but there are some similarities, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So,
and maybe it's because of also their proximity. So the wildlings still, on some shape or form, interact with the Night's Watch, and so they're still over on Westeros, where you have kings and lords and things like that. Whereas Essos is, they're free cities. They're just more trading ports. It's different. They don't have that kind of chivalry structure, that that like medieval structure that we think about that that Westeros has.
Right. Here's something that's interesting, and I'll just, as we're thinking about this chapter, when Dany tries to command the other Blood Riders, she can't really do that. I mean, she does to some degree, but like they're not, they won't allow themselves to be commanded by a Khaleesi typically. But the Khal himself will submit himself to the wisdom and the authority of like the Dash Khaleen, so they're in Vaes Dothrak. But so that's kind of weird, right? I mean, so like later on, Dany, if she were to go back there, would have the ability to command these other men from the sacred city. But right now, no. Like the Blood Riders, that's the struggle she has here, is that they won't really listen to her, and they fight her, essentially. One of them, anyways. So, yeah.
It is interesting when you start to look at their kind of political power structure. You have lines here like, "It is not for a woman to bid us halt." Quaithe said, "Not even a Khaleesi." "We camp here," Dany repeated. "Hogo, tell them that Khal Drogo commanded the halt. If they ask, tell them my time is near, and I could not continue." "You do not command me, Khaleesi," Quaithe says. And then she tells him to find Miri Mazder. Quaithe glares down at her. "The Magi, this I will not do. You will, or when Drogo wakes, you will hear that he will hear that you defied me." So there is still that fear of Khal Drogo, regardless of whether he's kind of sick or not. That people say.
Yeah, because right now they're still trying to preserve him. There's still life in him. So blood of my blood. They're still connected, trying to serve him, if you will, until he dies. Once he dies, then all hell breaks loose. So yeah.
Later down on that same page is where you have some of Dany's women saying, Dany's saying, "The cow cannot die. His father was a stallion. He is the father of the stallion who mounts the world. His hair has never been cut. He still wears the bells his father gave him." Every time I'm going to keep pointing out these bells references. And then another one on the next page talking about his bells she laid aside carefully, one by one. He would want them again when he was well, she told herself. So, I'm still using these bells as trying to make reference for what we saw in season 8 and make some sense, because it is interesting now thinking about that, going back, thinking about the bells and Dany and why there would be some sort of justification for that. But so Dany is demanding that Miri Mazder be brought forth so that she can make another poultice or whatever to help Khal Drogo. She ends up coming forth. She also wants Jorah brought forth as well, so that he can kind of help her through this situation. He kneels beside her. He looked at Drogo hard and says, "Send your maids away." Wordlessly, her throat tight with fear, Dany made a gesture. When they're alone, Ser Jorah drew his dagger, and he let's see here. He drew his dagger, and deftly, with a delicacy surprising in such a big man, he began to scrape away the black leaves and dried blue mud from Drogo's chest. The plaster had caked hard as the mud walls of the Lamb Men, and like those walls, it cracked easily. Ser Jorah broke the dry mud with his knife, pried the chunks from the flesh, peeled off the leaves one by one. A foul, sweet smell rose from the wound, so thick it almost choked her. The leaves were crusted with blood and pus. Drogo's black breast black and glistening with corruption. Yeah,
they realized that they hadn't been following the instructions. When you go get a little medical procedure, you got to listen to those doctor orders, right? You got to make sure you take your meds and, change the wrappings and all that stuff. And I think what was the thing? I mean, he was drinking something he shouldn't have been drinking, right? And milk of the poppy, right? He was drinking that to kind of quell the pain, and then he had the dressing. Later on, we find that Mira kind of realizes that's not the same dressing that she had put on. So this was sort of a softer heel, like kind of a. It feels good right now, and it helped him feel, I think, probably initially better. Whereas like the dressing that she put on it was like fiery and hot and was pulling out. It was painful, but it was doing its job. So really, my question is, was she really? I mean, she was really helping him, right? If he would have followed her instructions, I think maybe she was actually doing what was best for him. What do you think?
Yeah, probably a little bit. I would say there's probably because later, she says, well, I don't care that I killed him because, I don't care that he's dead because you ruined my life. So who cares? But that seems to be in reference more to the ritual that she performs, because she now finds herself, I can do blood magic and they'll let me do it.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm kind of with you. She probably does to some sense help him.
Well, it makes me think that she's doing it initially to save her people, Right.
Well, she also probably wants to. I still think that she would want to cause as much damage as possible, and so if she proves herself to be a good healer and heal Khal Drogo, then maybe she will be the one that gets to help Dany when Dany is giving birth, because obviously Dany is very obviously pregnant, and so maybe that's her moment where she could do some other kind of ceremony and cause Dany and probably the baby harm, but it just ends up working in the other way, where she ends up helping with that blood magic, kill, the horse and the baby, and make Khal Drogo like a zombie.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. She takes advantage of Dany's not understanding, and really, it's you wonder if the Dothraki, they warn her time and time and time again about this lady, but it's like she's never seen anything like this, and I wonder if they have. I wonder if they've seen other people who have dealt in these arts, and they know. Maybe not just rumors, but there are people who deal in blood magic, and they know it's not good. They've seen the death that comes with it, or whatever, or the cost that is needed to be paid. So you almost wish you had a story like that. It probably would have persuaded Dany, though, not to go forward with this procedure.
Right. Well, I think I think from Dany's perspective, one of the things I like about this chapter, you skip down here a little bit where it says. So right after Jorah Mormont's kind of cutting into that wound a little bit in the dressing. No, Dany whispered as tears ran down her cheeks. No, please, gods, hear me. No. A little bit further down than that. Your Khal is as good as dead, princess. She's like, he can't die. He mustn't. It was only a cut. I will not let him die. So Jorah gives a bitter laugh. Khaleesi, or queen, that command is beyond your power. Save your tears, child. Weep them tomorrow or in a year from now. We must go, and quickly, before he dies. She says, go. Where should we go? Ahai, I would say. It lies far to the south at the end of the known world. Yet men say it is a great port. We will find a ship there to take us back to Pentos. And then he talks about the Blood Riders. She says, Khal Drogo commanded them to keep me safe. But if he dies, she touched the swell of her belly. I don't understand. Why should I flee? I am Khaleesi. I carry Drogo's heir. As I said earlier, princess, hear me. The Dothraki will not follow a suckling babe. Drogo's strength was what they bowed to, and only that. Yeah. But then he talks about he is Drogo's son, and the crones say he will be the stallion who mounts the world. It was prophesied, better to kill the child than to risk his fury when he grows into manhood. And so again, it's just another one of the it's a growing chapter for Dany. Is she's beginning to realize it's not going to be as easy as you thought, and there's certain sacrifices that she's going to have to make along the way, and her path ultimately towards getting the Iron Throne.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And this is one of them.
Sure, yeah. Isn't it interesting though that the prophecy that her child would be the stallion that mounts the world, and that they kind of foresaw that? And I don't know. Sometimes with prophecy, it's sort of like, if this is what's going to come to pass, and then you're looking for it to happen, how can these Blood Riders think that they can, stop that or put an end to that? I guess isn't that sort of the whole idea that there's more to, as Yoda says, a prophecy misread, maybe, right? Because it ends up being this whole crazy situation becomes a part of how, as you say, Dany grows, and then how her dragons come to be. So it's just interesting that the Blood Riders thought that they could put an end to this prophecy by killing this babe, and it's more than that. So,
well, I mean, it's hard to say, because on one hand you feel like they would really believe in and buy in 100% to this prophecy, but at the other hand, it's like, well, if they're just going to kill if they would just kill the baby because they don't want a rival, then maybe they didn't find it as
convincing,
as they originally thought.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, again, it'd be like saying, so, okay, the Dash Kaleen, so they enjoyed this great honor and status among the Dothraki, and they serve as seers, foretelling the future and interpreting omens. It's like, if Dany were to be one of them, what role would she play in that, right? I mean, so are they really seers? Are they really people who can foretell the future? Or are they just, just making stuff up? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Okay, well, a little bit further on here, Dany remembers the story that Viserys had told her of what the usurper's dogs had done to Rhaegar's children. His son had been a babe as well, yet they had ripped him from his mother's breast and dashed his head against the wall. And she starts to think of that. They must not hurt my son. I will order my cause to keep him safe. And Drogo's blood riders will. Ser Jorah steps in. A blood rider dies with his call. You know that, child. They will take you to Vaes Dothrak, to the crones. That is the last duty they owe him in life. When it is done, they will join Drogo in the Nightlands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Dany's, thinking, well, no one's died yet, right? So we're good. So let's make this work. If he doesn't die, that's the whole key. So let's just save him, and we'll be fine. But he sees death on him. He sees that he fell off his horse. I mean, Jorah sees what Mir Mazdur sees later, is that he has but maybe just a day, less than a day to live. He'll be dead by morning.
Yeah. Mir Mazdur studies Drogo, her face still and dead. The wound has festered. And then all of Dany's Dothraki are telling her this is completely all her fault, and Dany doesn't listen or believe it or want any. She just keeps buying in and buying in and buying in. They push her to the ground and start kicking her. Kicks her to merciful for a magi. Take her outside. We will stake her to the earth, to be the mount of every passing man. And when they are done with her, the dogs will use her as well. Weasels will tear out her entrails. And on and on. I mean, they're just talking about it. And Dany says, "No, I will not have her armed."
Mm-hmm.
And they're all saying, like, "No, like, what are you talking about?"
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I go back to, I mean, maybe she did something that was initially hurt. Maybe the initial pain that she was, or the dressing she puts on, like unknown to everyone else there, is poisonous or is something that's going to cause, that's going to do harm. And then their healers try to come in and, fix it, but it's too late, if you will, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So or maybe she knew they wouldn't follow the instructions, or she knew how they were going to react and knew that this was going to cause them some pain. I don't know, but they definitely don't. They think it's her. They think she is the one who's caused this, and they keep calling her like this witch, this magi, right? And then you find out later on that she doesn't really actually confess to it. She kind of does. She says, she almost says like, "Am I?" When Dany asks, because Dany will say later, "Then you truly are a magi." And she says, "Am I?" question mark. Mm-hmm. And then she says, "Only a magi can save your rider now, Silver Lady." And she learns just above that too. She explains where she learns some of her spells and stuff, and it's in the Shadowlands. And her teacher was a blood mage from the Shadowlands. Said that she had to pay dearly for this skill and stuff that she acquired. So you wonder, what was the payment to learn this type of stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right here, as you were saying. You do not ask a slave, and Dany says, "And now you must save him," Dany said. "You do not ask a slave," Miri replied sharply. "You tell her." She goes on here. She says, "He's beyond a healer's skills." And she starts to look him over a little bit. She says, "I made him a poultice of fire pod and sting me not, or sting me, and bound it in lambskin. It burned, he said. He tore it off. The herb woman made him a new one, wet and soothing. She says, it burned. Yes, there is great healing magic in fire. Even you hairless men must know that. So again, I do think that's interesting. Hey, she's from Ahai. She knows a little bit about fire magic. Is it possible it's stuff from her lore and they just have different languages or different views of that?
Yeah, it could be. That's the cool part about it. We really don't know. When you think of this big overarching sort of battle between R'hllor and the Great Other, and the connection between the two.
Because at this point in the story, R'hllor has never been mentioned because R'hllor doesn't really show up until a Clash of Kings.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so we almost wonder, like, if in the writing process too, there, if George kind of had that in mind, if knew that's where he was driving towards, or wrote this book and then thought, okay, let's see what I can do to kind of, I don't know. I always wonder how much he had in his mind before he starts the first book. Like, did he anticipate doing all these other things? It's just it's a lot.
Well, I mean, yeah, at this point too, think about it. What we've seen from cold or ice has been death. Like, we saw the White Walkers very early on, and then John's at the wall. So we haven't really seen them again, but they still kind of talk about them, like what lies beyond the wall. And now we have a moment here where we're talking about fire and its healing properties. So,
right, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so then Dany is pleading with her, save him and I will free you. Then Mirror Mazda sets back on her heels and studied Daenerys through eyes as black as night. There is a spell. Her voice was quiet, scarcely more than a whisper, but it is hard, lady and dark. Some would say that death is cleaner. I have learned the way in Ahai and paid dear for the lesson, as you said. My teacher was a blood mage from the Shadowlands. You are truly Magi, as you had said. Am I? Only a Magi can save your rider now. Is there no other way? No other. Khal Drogo gave a shuddering gasp. Do it, Dany blurted. She must not be afraid. She was the blood of the dragon. Save him. There's a price. You will have gold, horses, whatever you like. It is not a matter of gold or horses. This is blood magic. Only death may pay for life. My death, she told herself she would die if she must. She was the blood of the dragon. She would not be afraid. Her brother Rhaegar had died for the woman he loved. No, Mirror Mazda promised, not your death, Khaleesi. And so I wonder if then bring his horse, Mirror Mazda commanded, and so it was done. But I mean, really, it's do you think that would have been enough, just the death of a horse for the death of to save Khal Drogo?
Well, and that's sort of what Dany says. She says later on she would pay this price 1,000 times over. Like, sure, if it's just a horse to save Khal Drogo, then sure, no problem. But the other thing is too, it's almost like an accident that she ends up kind of involved and pulled into all of this later on. Right, I mean that's this. We'll get to that at the end of the chapter. It seems like that she wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that tent or what have you. But yeah, I think it was just going to be the stallion, and I think from Mira's point of view, it's she knows what the end result is going to look like, and that he's going to be this zombified, guy, if you will. But and you're taking the blood or the life from the stallion, and you're using that to do some patchwork here on Khal Drogo, but really any other living thing that is within the radius or whatever of that spell is going to, like, some of its life force I feel like is going to be drawn on. So that's what I think is scary at the end of this chapter.
As we go down here a little bit, we need the blood. Mary answers that it's the only way. Then Dany, Drogo edged back, his hand on his arc. He was a youth of 16, whip-thin, fearless, quick to laugh, with the faint shadow of his first mustachio on his upper lip. Khaleesi, you must not do this. Let me kill the Magi. Kill her and you kill your Khal, Dany says. This is blood magic. It is forbidden. I am Khaleesi, and I say it is not forbidden. In Vaes Dothrak, Khal Drogo slew a stallion, and I ate his heart. He gave our son strength and courage. This is the same. So she does, Dany, I will say, of of making rationalization for this, this is actually one point she makes, and I think it is pretty justified. It is similar to what she did there.
What do you mean?
I mean, in terms of like the idea of blood magic, they're saying blood magic is forbidden, but she did eat the stallion of a heart in the idea that it would give her son.
Oh yeah, sure.
Or the heart of a stallion, I should say. Right, to give her unborn son strength.
Yep.
I mean, that sounds like magic to me.
Yeah. And so she's wondering what's the difference, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of justifying it to the people around her who all want to kill Mary Mazder, I think that's a pretty good, valid point on Dany's part.
You know, something I didn't even think about until you said that is their stallions are like, they worship the horse lord god, you know, so it's like that would be, I mean, killing the stallion to save Khal Drogo is sort of you almost wonder how they looked at that, if that was a really even worse thing to do, would be to kill his horse, so because of how much they worship and follow, you know, the horse lord in their faith. Interesting, because they choose a stallion's heart for her to eat. So
yeah, absolutely. So they start to get it set up. Essentially, they have to bring in the horse. They talk about how the horse is struggling because it smells death, and then they have to hold it down and kill it. You know, when they let the stallion fall, a bath was dark red, and nothing showed of Drogo but his face. Mary Mazder had no use for the carcass. Burn it, Dany told them. It was what they did. She knew when a man died, his mount was killed and placed beneath him on the funeral pyre to carry him into the Nightlands. The men of her cause dragged the carcass from the tent. The blood had gone everywhere. And that's essentially, then it's just talking about there's just red everywhere. You know, braziers were lit. Mary Mazder tossed a red powder onto the coals. It gave the smoke a spicy scent, a pleasant enough smell. It talks about people are sobbing. Dany says, "I will stay here," and they're saying, you know, you should probably leave. And she says, "No one will enter." She bent over the tub. Even Drogo in his bath of blood, she kissed him lightly on the brow. "Bring him back to me," she whispered to Mary Mazder before she fled.
Yeah, man.
And then right around this time, as this ceremony is taking place, you know, more people are trying to step in and stop it, and then this is where Jorah Mormont gets into a battle with some of Khal Drogo's men, and he ends up killing a few of them. Yeah,
Quaithe, right? He shows up and is like super pissed. I mean, they brought back the eunuchs, right? Didn't they bring back other healers, and we're trying to intervene and what have you, and it's like he's really, I mean, in his defense, he's just trying to do what he thinks is best for Khal Drogo, and he doesn't want any of this blood magic going on, was against her doing the healing to begin with. So yeah, and I mean, and then what happens is, you know, you have this battle here between Jorah Mormont, who is no slouch, and Quaithe, who is a boss. Everyone take 2 drinks. And just for those of you guys who don't listen in the Facebook group, there's a big conversation right now going on about the drinking game we've been trying to put together, and everyone's kind of piecing it together. And it's anytime we say things like that we, I guess, say it quite often. Yeah.
So
anytime we mention Lord Adam Parker's
any
you have to
of
finish
those
your
things.
drink.
finish those drinks. So
Jeez. It's funny.
Okay, so all right, so that battle begins. You know, you die now. He promised Arak, shivering through the red twilight. And then as this is going on, as they're beginning to fight, Dany is feeling her son kicking inside. And so that's essentially how this chapter ends, is that Dany goes into labor as all of this is going on. Jorah Mormont's fighting. Khal Drogo, the ceremony is being performed by Mary Mazder, this blood magic, and Dany's starting to go into labor.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, Jorah ends up winning that fight, which is, I mean, the only reason he does is because that it gets Quaithe's, what is it, the Arak gets, gets stuck in his hip.
Eric,
gets stuck in his hip, so he has a moment to cut him down, and it's pretty pretty radical. He cuts him up pretty good.
Right, which is actually, it's cool because it references back to, we see it in the show too, where Jorah's talking about plate, versus the different types of armor and things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Right. Yep. So, I mean, there's all that going on. And then right at the end, they're realizing, as you said, she's going into labor, and they want to take her to some of the women, like the handmaidens want to take her to the birthing women, but they'll have nothing to do with Dany because they think she's cursed. They think she is kind of bringing all of this evil on them, and so they will have nothing to do with her. So they realize that Miriam Azdur has said that she knows how to handle a labor or, birth a baby. So here we go. They're going to go into the tent, which is nuts.
Yeah. So, and that's essentially how this chapter ends, is really setting the stage for Dany's. I think she has 2 chapters left in this in this book, but yeah, things not looking good for Daenerys right now.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. I mean, if Ser Jorah doesn't carry her into the tent there at the end, like, whole different story, or what? I
don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think Miriam Azdur is performing all kinds of weird magic in there because, what we see, Melisandre is able to do blood magic that affects people way far away from where she's at, right? With like the leeches, and they name the kings that they want to die. And I mean, Balon Greyjoy is nowhere close to Melisandre. Joffrey's not really close to where Melisandre is. I mean, she then goes and plays a part specifically in killing Renly Baratheon, but so it's hard to say exactly.
Sure. It just all comes down to what her intent was. Was she trying to actually take Dany's baby, or did this happen, like as an accident? She's given them, specific instructions not to come in. She gave them specific instructions not to change that dressing and not to drink, other potions and things that would help with the healing. So people are disobeying what she's saying to do, so it's hard, it muddles it. It makes it all muddled. Something real interesting too at the end there. She does glimpse the shadow of a great wolf and another like a man wreathed in flames. So that was kind of cool. When she looks in the tent, she's seeing these other, creatures or the undead. Who knows what she's really seeing there? But it looks like a shape of a great wolf. And I think they even show that in that's a part of the show too. Like when they look at the tent, you'll see what looks like a wolf dancing around, and then another man who's covered in flames. So crazy stuff. Don't mess with blood magic, guys. That's a lesson of the day. Like, seriously, don't do it. So
yeah, don't trust blood magic. I mean, I think that's our PSA here.
Yep.
On Ben and E this week, remember those old cartoons used to have PSAs at the end where they'd be like, don't smoke cigarettes, or don't do drugs. Yeah, don't trust blood magic.
Yep.
I think that's good advice for us all.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, Lord, okay.
Well, should we move on over to a few ravens that we have, Sir Ezra?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Sir David here coming up first. Sir David of House Fraser says to us, good day, Sir Matt and Sir Ezra. I wanted to take a few minutes to thank you for always putting together an amazing podcast. It has quickly turned into my favorite podcast that I listen to on a daily basis. Sweet. Okay. I came across your podcast right before Season 8 began. I wanted to see what everyone else was thinking about the upcoming season and what predictions everyone had. I started out as a show-heavy fan when Season 4 came. I had surgery to have my gallbladder removed, and a longtime friend suggested I watch Game of Thrones while I was recovering. I remember watching the first few episodes and thinking how awesome Eddard Stark was, like most people, and thinking he was going to be a major character throughout the series.
Ooh, yeah. So did I.
Yeah. I eventually fell asleep due to painkillers, waking up to see him being executed and thinking, what the hell happened while I was asleep?
Oh, no.
Wow. I was immediately hooked. Eventually, I started reading into the wiki and fan-based articles, getting a lot of information that was based on the books. Sadly, I never pushed myself to find the time to read the books until now. It's my personal opinion that your show is a perfect transition from show to book and book to show. Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
After the show ended, I became determined to read the books finally. And it's awesome having the Read Along podcast to help point out key elements in each chapter that I might have overlooked as a first-time reader. Currently, I work for a delivery company. Hint, think of me as a year-round Santa that drives a big brown truck. Okay. I work almost 12 hours a day, so I can usually squeeze in a couple episodes a day. Right now, I'm about 2/3 of the way through Game of Thrones and Fire and Blood. I can't say if I have a favorite house in the world of Ice and Fire, but as a former Special Forces soldier, I enjoy hearing about great warriors like Sir Arthur Dayne and Sir Barristan Selmy.
Yeah,
Yes,
let's go.
I bet Sir David does. Unfortunately, due to the long hours and being a single father, it can be hard for me to be involved in the community post. But and I feel like my knowledge isn't that extensive just yet. I have no theories that haven't been addressed at some point on the podcast. The only contribution I can provide is through Patreon. Keep up the amazing work, Sir Matt and Sir Ezra, and everyone else involved in putting together an amazing show, Sir David. Well, we have a PS here. PS, I'm listening to a podcast from last year when you guys talked about soccer. Oh, yeah. I have played for almost 30 years. Some of that time was in Europe, so if you guys ever have any questions about the sport, let me know. Well, we're still trying to figure out which team to support. I think that's been a bit.
Well, hey, it's easy when I can just support the USA women's team. Okay.
Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, that's nice.
Old Meg out there, just lighting people up.
Lighting it up.
Yeah. So I was all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet being a part of this, a member of the Special Forces, that Sir David would, it's like, would be drawn to Sir Arthur Dayne and Sir Barristan Selmy, because that is the Special Forces of Westeros, right? I mean, nobody messes with those guys. You can send in one Sir Barristan Selmy and he saves the Mad King. No big deal. So, yeah, that's really cool, man. That's awesome.
I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, Barristan Selmy was at the Battle of Triton, and that didn't seem to help.
It's
because a horse fell on him. Okay, obviously, I think Barristan Selmy is the best. So, he had unforeseen circumstance, and we all know that he let Rhaegar win at the battle, during the tourney of Harrenhal, because he says, if I had been a better knight,
right?
Hey, it's something we talk about a lot in that most recent Patreon episode. So go make sure to check that out, because it's really, really, really good. But it is just something interesting to think about when Sir Ezra and I go back and forth on who's better, Arthur Dayne or Barristan Selmy, quite often. But
yeah, it's a good conversation to have.
Okay, well, we got another one here from Lady Martha of House Gerson. Hey guys, I really enjoyed the podcast and gave it a 5-star review, which is well deserved. Thank you very much. Those are super, super huge helps. I was just a show watcher, but decided to start the audiobooks and join the reread. However, I also wanted to see what the order of the prequel books is. I've heard you mention the Dunk and Egg series. Is that right before A Song of Ice and Fire, or is there one before? Where do I begin? Okay. So I think this is a good this is a good time to talk about that. So this is essentially I'll provide kind of the extensive guide. So you have the World of Ice and Fire book, which is essentially a history book told through us by maesters who are writing this history, and it covers all the way from as early as possible, essentially, up to the Robert Baratheon becoming king. It's really, really good. You can buy it on Amazon for like $30. The audiobook is okay, but I think really owning the big book of that is one that I would recommend, because it's kind of like a coffee table book, and the artwork in it is amazing. I own both I own 3 versions of it. I own the original, the audiobook, and I have the ebook version. But I mean, if you only had to get one, I myself, being an audiobook person, I still would argue getting the big physical book is really good, because it's also not like, it's got this almost kind of like foam
Yeah.
You know, Sir Ezra, it's
like
a
cover?
different. I don't the cover. It's like it's a really nice cover. It's not like one that's gonna, sometimes hardcover books. They start to get those crinkled in the edges and stuff like that. Like if you ever use think about like textbooks you had in high school or college. This one's got this different, really well cover. So I definitely recommend getting that. Then you have Fire and Blood, which is the newer kind of history book. Fire and Blood covers Aegon's conquest up until where does it end? It ends right after the Dance with Dragons, right?
Yep. It's just a king or so after, yeah.
Yeah, and so Fire and Blood, I will say, I had a difficult time getting through because I just found it to be quite dry. It's good, but some of the information is kind of rehashed information. I think you and I both said that the Aegon's Conquest chapter is literally word for word the same thing that's in A World of Ice and Fire. So I consider it almost a companion to kind of World of Ice and Fire. I think that if I had to choose between the two, I would definitely choose A World of Ice and Fire. But if you really want the full picture, it'd be okay to get it as well, because it really breaks down a lot of King Jaehaerys, who World of Ice and Fire is spends 2 pages on.
Yeah. So can I jump in here for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the way I would do it is when you get that World of Ice and Fire book, you read about the Dawn Age, the Age of Heroes, the Long Night, all of that stuff, the ancient histories, if you will, which is the first several chapters. And then when they get to a character known as Aegon the Conqueror, you could almost switch over and read Fire and Blood if you wanted to deep dive into the Targaryen legacy. Because they spend, from that point forward, it's just they follow right through all of the Targaryen kings, all the way up until the Mad King, essentially, right? I mean, they go that far. So, yeah, and Robert's Rebellion. So you could go all the way through Fire and Blood. Well, right now there's only Volume 1. Eventually Volume 2 will come out. So Fire and Blood, you really could use that for about half of the 300-year Targaryen reign, so 150 years into it. And then you could go back to A World of Ice and Fire and keep reading the rest of the history. And that would be decent. So
yeah.
I think that's
the other advantage Fire and Blood has is, so we still haven't gotten to Dunk and Egg in the main series yet, but we're getting close. So then you start to get into the novellas, which are a handful of kind of short stories. They're not really books, but they're almost short stories that expand even further on specific characters. So you have The Sons of the Dragon, which is a story about God, now I'm blanking on their names. The second 2 kings, Aenys.
Maegor. Yep.
Yeah. Maegor the Cruel and Aenys Targaryen, who are Aegon the Conqueror's sons. So you can find those individually. There's one called The Rogue Prince, which is about Daemon Targaryen. One about the Blacks and the Greens, which is more of the Dance of the Dragons. But some of that stuff is actually pretty much just collected in Fire and Blood, so it is kind of cool that you get that. The Sons of the Dragon, word for word, is in Fire and Blood, so that is where you kind of get that advantage, and I would imagine that you may get more of that in Fire and Blood Part 2 or something, but they're kind of difficult to track down on their own. I think you had to buy a book called The Book of Swords, which is just kind of this collection of a bunch of fantasy authors' tales about swords and things, and that's where The Sons of the Dragon is. And so that's kind of confusing. So that's one area where I will say Fire and Blood is I like it.
Yeah, so you don't have to track all those novellas down. You just go there, and he's recycled all the novella stuff into Fire and Blood. So yeah,
right. So that's pretty cool. So then you get to the Dunk and Egg series. So the Dunk and Egg series is right now 3 stories that should eventually be 7 stories, and it is the Hedge Knight, the Sworn Sword, and the Mystery Knight. So again, you could find those individually, or you can go buy a book called A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which is those 3 stories combined. I have the hardcover and what I think is the infinitely superior audiobook. The audiobook of that I cannot stress enough. We reference it all the time because it is simply that good. It's voiced by Harry Lloyd, who plays Viserys Targaryen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easily the best voice acted books in anything that any Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire stuff. Even better than Roy Dotrice in the books, in the main series books.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that's something we brag about all the time. It's just such a cool little thing, but it's really narrow in scope. So the other things we've mentioned are real broad strokes, kind of covering all the histories and characters and things, and telling you an overview of history. Versus that just follows Sir Duncan the Tall and Egg.
And Egg, who becomes Egg on the Fifth Targaryen. And it's all told through Sir Duncan the Tall's perspective. So it's all one. They're just 3 POV little mini books.
Yeah. Yep.
Also, I will say there are graphic novel versions of those, and they're all really good as well. Like I found one of them at a used bookstore for like $7. So that takes place about 100 years before the first Song of Ice and Fire book, A Game of Thrones. So that takes place about 100 years before that. And so some of the characters that appear in that, are referenced or are characters that actually are just really old. Like it's Dunk talks about his brother who is going to be, or Egg, talks about his brother who's becoming a maester. Well, that's Maester Aemon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even Walder Frey they mention at some point a young Walder Frey. So the thing I like about it, and we've talked about before, it's just written kind of differently than the main series. It's a little more loose. It's a little more fun. I almost feel like I wouldn't say it's necessarily a kid's book, but it has that kind of feel compared to a Game of Thrones where, anybody can die at any moment and, you're dealing with like dragons and all of this stuff. It's just like kind of a looser feel. So then you get into the books, the regular books series, which we're in. So you have a Game of Thrones, which is mostly season 1, if you're just coming from the show, a Clash of Kings, which is seasons 2 and 3. And then you have a Storm of Swords, which is like season 4. And then it kind of gets a little tricky because you have book 4 and book 5, which is A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. But the tricky thing about it is some of those events are happening at the same time. And there's actually guides on the internet. And Sir, I think you've looked it up. It's called like I've seen 2 titles for it. Some people have called it Boiled Leather, and other people have called it A Feast for Dragons. Is that correct?
Yes. There's just to go through, to make sure that they're kind of paired up, like and go in like a chronological order. If you want like the timeline, yes, a feast with dragons is the combined read of A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. So it's something that a couple guys, a couple of our Reddit, I think they're actually another group of podcasters, but it's really cool. It's a good little companion for the books.
Yeah, because so I mean, you could read them individually, but it's just some characters only appear in one book and some characters only appear in 2. I think originally the plan was the book was going to be the 4th book, and the publishers told George R. R. Martin this is way too big. And so he had to split it up into 2 books. And I know, Sir Ezra, you were telling me that you had started doing the read that way. And you're like, it just makes so much more sense.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's honestly, I would totally recommend it. And I got to give full credit here too. So it's Andrew Walker, Brendan B. Fish, Hannah Hosking, and Zach Louis, I think, who came up with this. And there's other versions out there. This is just their version, and I thought it was pretty cool. And as I'm reading through it, I'm like, wow, it's actually pretty amazing the connections that they're making. They're almost like you read prologue 1, then you read prologue 1 so you read prologue for A Feast for Crows, and then you read the prologue for A Dance of Dragons. And I'm amazed at how just reading those back to back shocked me. Just in just that first setup, just reading the prologues, and then to go from Jon to the Prophet, and it's just crazy how they take you back and forth. Like you might read 2 chapters of A Dance of Dragons, and then you might read 3 chapters in A Feast for Crows, and then you're back. And so it's kind of hard to keep track of, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but because you I think what you were telling me when you were doing that, some of that read was you're like, it just seems to make more sense because some of the events, it's like they're happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Both books are kind of happening at the same time.
Yeah. So for example, like you pick up something in one of the prologues that happens in another book, like you'd almost have to wait a whole book later to tie the connection between, I don't want to give any. I'd have to go do. It's when Bran's going up and he's going up to the cave, and he comes across a pack of wolves, and there's this tie back into the prologue. So it's just the way that they order the chapters. It puts them closer together. So I hadn't forgot about what I had just read when I read about that pack of wolves that shows up that they encounter, that Mira and everyone encounters, and then Cold Hands kind of leaves and does his thing. It was still there, fresh in my mind, if you will. So if I would have read it just in the book, I would almost been like a book away from what I had just experienced. So it was just really, really neat, I guess.
Well, it's like what we were talking about earlier today when we were talking about Dany chapters and how in this book alone you go through a period of 10 chapters where you don't even talk about Daenerys.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it's just as the story gets bigger and gets more spread out, you kind of forget kind of what's happening with people, and I think that's why I think most people will argue the worst book in the series is A Feast for Crows. I think and then some people hate Dance with Dragons, some people love it, some people argue it's the best book. But yeah, so I'm actually interested to do that read of and do it that way and see if it makes more sense. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of like the comprehensive guide of the books. Anything outside of that, there are graphic novels of like the main Game of Thrones books. They're still being put together. They're okay. I certainly think that the Dunk and Egg ones are much better. There's other companion kind of stuff. There's like the Atlas of Ice and Fire, which Sir Ezra has, and it's just a bunch of maps, and it's really well put together, really nice. There was one other thing I was thinking about that I was going to recommend for some kind of cool lore stuff. I would actually recommend just going on YouTube. But in the DVD and Blu-ray releases of the show, they do cool little history backgrounds.
Yeah,
and they're told through us by the characters. So. Jaime Lannister, Nikolai, whatever his last name is, is reading this kind of history, but he's it's Jaime Lannister is telling it. So you almost get kind of their perspective on these historical events that they don't really ever touch in the show. They just don't really have the time to. But it's just kind of cool to go check some of those out on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
if you own the Blu-rays. So, yeah, so that's kind of like the comprehensive guide of here's kind of all the places to look, and then I would kind of go through in terms of really expanding from the show.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So that's a great question, and yeah. If anybody has more detailed questions, because it does get a little muddled if you go back to like how do you read the Dunk and Egg series and then compare it to A World of Ice and Fire. It's just sort of like at one point
they're different. Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, World of Ice and Fire breaks off and goes into regions. So it's like there's a whole another second half to that book that's all just dedicated to the history of each region, which goes into more detail there. So.
Yeah. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So great question. Something I think it's good for us to kind of bring up every now and then. It's just so we always have new people jumping in at any point in this podcast. So I think kind of a good place. So
yeah. All right, cool. So real quickly before we head out of here on just in Man the Wall, we've mentioned it, the Patreon series, the Tourney at Harrenhal series, And the plug I'll make for that is, if you've ever wondered why the Knight of the Laughing Tree, who the Knight of the Laughing Tree is, if you've pondered that and you've wondered like, which character is it? Are we supposed to know? Whatever. Come take a listen to this month's Patreon episode, because we discuss maybe why it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that was actually a really super interesting theory in talking about, because I think we have always thought, oh, it's such a big deal, and this theory we've been breaking down, this guy's like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So if you want to know why,
like, whoa, okay,
come
all right,
man.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. I still think it matters, but it's
I do too.
It's interesting the route that he took this.
So, all right, well, guys, it's time to say farewell. We want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will be discussing Chapter 65, Arya 5.
If you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, leave a comment, or send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com.
We will see you in a week, and remember that winter is coming. And Sir Ezra only has to sit through 2 more Dany chapters this book.
Thank God.